enough away from me to kind of, it's off the radar, so.
Yeah, they haven't all been scheduled anyway.
Okay. Anyway, so I hope to see everybody again on February 27th for the next meeting. And it'll be here, and 7 o'clock, all the usuals. Hopefully we won't have 4 simultaneous meetings that time, but anyway. I wanted to mention this. This is a crappy picture, but I wanted to mention this. Today is, I don't know if you know this or not, but today is January the 23rd, which is the NASA Day of Remembrance for the crews of three missions: Apollo 1, STS-61L, which was the Challenger mission, and STS-107, which was the Columbia, loss of the Columbia. And so this is the day that NASA has set aside to kind of remember those crews. I've always been a bit of a space buff, you probably know that. I actually volunteered or applied for the astronaut program. It was obviously not accepted. I did get far enough to actually get the physical, which I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Right Stuff.
Yeah.
It's not that far off. There's a few things in there that they know, like they don't stick the thing in your hand anymore, which I was pretty thankful about. But you go to the same place, the Lovelace Clinic in New Mexico, and you get prodded in places you probably would not want to be prodded, or I certainly didn't. But apparently I didn't. My thyroid is not normal enough for them, which I suppose when you've got 1,000 anatomically and intellectually perfect people to choose from, you can eliminate the guy with the bad thyroid, or at least that's the story I tell myself. But anyway, it's always been something of great interest to me, and something I've always had a tremendous amount of respect for. So I always like to kind of remember this day. Anyway, so today. Another thing, I mentioned this in my little New Year's greeting. I've been a member of a couple of clubs, including a rowing club and something else that I can't remember right now. But anyway, and one of the things we did in those clubs was we had kind of like a book exchange. Like people would list books they had on a particular subject that they would make available for lending to other club members if other club members were interested. I know the lending of books is always kind of a controversial thing. I've had more than a few walk away from me during the course of my life. But one of the things that was nice about doing it that way is that, you know, there was a system involved, so you knew who to get your book back from eventually. So if anybody has any interest, I think Graham has expressed some interest in it. I think he probably does a lot of reading on this subject now. It would just essentially consist of, you know, a list, if you wanted to participate, which would be totally voluntary, a list of whatever books on the subject that is proximate or part of astronomy in this case. So if anybody has any interest in this, I would be more than willing to kind of set it up if you kind of shoot me an email or anything. Eventually I would basically involve just publishing a list of books, and people who wanted to read something could contact whoever owns it and ask them and all that. So strictly voluntary, but I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. It's worked reasonably well in other clubs that I've belonged to. So anyway, if there's any interest, just let me know. Let's see, what else? I'm always looking for topics for meetings, and right at the moment I'm sitting on 0. So if anybody has any suggestions, if you want to do one, right, you want to put one together, I certainly would urge or support that. If you have something you'd like to hear about that I could put together, I'm happy to do that as well. If you're kind of, you know, want to see meetings run or worked in a somewhat different way, our pattern has sort of been, you know, some presentation on some topic. I'm totally open to suggestion. You know, I kind of feel like I don't want to be the one that decides all of this necessarily, although I guess that's part of my job description. But so if anybody has anything they want to do, I would be more than willing to build that into the schedule. One thing I am thinking about doing is I've been kind of going through this process of learning how to do exoplanet orbit analysis through this. You know, our speaker in November was the guy from NASA, whose name is escaping me right at the moment, Rob, who runs this program called Transit Search or Transit Watch or something like that. And you know, you can go to the Transit Watch site and download data sets that they collect from automated telescopes and things like that, and do your own analysis. You know, we might want to try it sometime with club scopes as well. So that's something I'm kind of hoping to work into the schedule sometime relatively soon, because I've been kind of learning how to do all that stuff, which is very fascinating. Other than that, I don't really have any ideas. So if anybody has a topic that interests them, or burning desire to talk about a topic that interests them, please let me know. Let's see, do we have any announcements? Anything else that we want to talk about? Justin, very good news, glad to hear it.
Yep.
Any other?
Do we know if the PO box has been paid for now?
That would be Tony,
Yes,
right?
I think it was.
Yes,
Okay.
it was.
Yeah, I assume that's why the mail was bouncing. I saw that on the email list.
Okay.
Because I was
okay.
gonna mail it in, and then I saw that, and I didn't, and I was gonna bring it tonight, and I forgot.
Okay, I don't think
So I
Tony.
need to mail it in.
Tony may not be here tonight, but
He said he's gonna be late.
is he gonna be late? So yeah, he may have some more information on that. But as far as I know, that's all back to Tony. That reminds me, I need to pay for a T-shirt order. But okay.
And he also said too that he'd try to do sweatshirts or whatever.
Right,
also.
sweatshirts and hoodies or something like that. So there's more options than just the traditional T-shirt. But,
Supposed to be here in June, I think.
All right, is that right? I need to.
Just guessing.
Okay. All right, let's see. Any other announcements or anything for the good of the order? Anybody have any burning things they need to share with the group?
Open house calendar is being worked on.
Okay, okay. Good. Okay, well, let's see. What else is there? So that brings us to the main thing that we want to discuss a little bit tonight, which is something that I think many of you probably have already heard about. We discussed this a little bit at the Christmas holiday party. At that point, we had a board meeting, and we decided that perhaps, or the board, considered that maybe it would be a good idea to kind of discuss this a little bit more with the club. So that's a topic for tonight. So I found this kind of interesting when I started looking into this, because I started digging into the history a little bit, which the history of Torpoint and the Tombaugh and Nikau goes way back to before my arrival here. I still sort of feel like a new guy. It's been for 4 years, maybe 5 years. So I haven't overlapped with that much of the club, but I got kind of interested in the history of how all this came about. This, of course, is going to be old news to many of you. I guess the observatory actually founded in '97. Is that correct? From what I could be able to tell, or at least it was built in '97. Is that right?
Actually, it's late spring, or late fall of '96.
So a little
When
early.
we had the open house.
Yeah, and of course the original telescope was not the one that's out there now. I guess.
The original telescope was a 17.5-inch Newtonian, fork-mounted Newtonian. That was built with 55-gallon drum barrel as one of its covers. So it was a junkyard scope.
Yeah, and I guess the
Terrible optics.
Yeah. Well, what we now call the Tombaugh was the mirror from the Pitt telescope, which was originally installed someplace different on KU campus, and it was, I guess it has a little bit of a history of being moved around. I found this article from the Lawrence Journal World that kind of describes all this happening from back in 2004, which is, I guess, about the time you all moved it, right? 2004, 2005.
That sounds right.
I found out for a couple of interesting
Actually,
things.
just a little before that.
Yeah. So these, of course, are
2003.
two of the current members who are involved in all of that. Apparently the original mirror, the mirror that was the Pitt mirror, was the very first large all Pyrex astronomical mirror ever made, which I didn't know until I was reading some of the.
Not exactly right.
Okay.
It was the first glass pour of
Oh.
Pyrex in various other tests. These were test instruments before they built the 200-inch.
So that's what the blank was from a test on
Yes, right,
that. Okay.
right.
So it has quite a history. I first became aware of it when it was mounted on top of Lindley Hall on the KU campus, which is always going to have a warm place in my heart, because the parking lot of Lindley Hall was where I first met my wife. So it was on in this funny little cone-shaped.
You don't have to tell us anymore.
Which is it was nothing untoward. I was going to teach a field camp. She was a student, and 32 years later we got
Yeah, that's
married.
right.
So anyway, so the point here is that this is not a new thing, moving this thing around, and I kind of went into this history a little bit because I was actually interested to learn that the reason for, I guess, moving this, the scope was originally built, according to this article, which I don't know how accurate Terry Rombeck's history actually is, was originally built to search for asteroids. It was
Yes.
never actually used for that, apparently.
It was actually, as what I saw in print was that it was used for discovery of solar system objects.
Mhm.
Okay, they didn't specifically say asteroids, but
Okay.
comets, asteroids, whatever. So that was the original design. What it was designed to do.
And when you all kind of got it for the purposes of relocated, that was your stated purpose, right? Was that you were going to build
Sure.
a telescope. So apparently there was a relatively large NASA grant by
Yes.
50,000 plus, I believe,
60, almost 70,000.
to build which is a pretty good score, to build
Yeah. Back then.
build the telescope, build the building, situate it, all that stuff. So I guess the point is that moving telescopes is not something that's never happened for the club. One of the things though that I wanted to also talk a bit about, and this is mainly for people who may have been in the club for a while and heard blah 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 neo blah 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 neo, maybe not necessarily understood or fully aware of what is being done with this scope. So I wanted to spend a minute or two on that, and why we care about these things, why NASA would be willing to fork over $60K to move a telescope, essentially to look at near Earth objects. So I'm always struck by the fact that when we think about the solar system, we think about it looking like this, right? There's this big sun, there's a few little spots of stuff. There's actually, it didn't work, damn it. Dang it. This is so cool that I'm gonna do this anyway, even though it's gonna take time to set this up. I'm gonna go ahead and go to this website here, because it is really pretty interesting, I think. Where's the browser? This will do. So what it really looks like, if this works, which it's not so far. Damn it.
I don't think you get it copied.
I don't either. No good on any.
There you go.
No good on any
Control
computers
C.
but mine. Okay. What it really looks like, please make this work, is this. It's just a cloud of stuff of various sizes, from grains of sand on up to Jupiter-sized objects. But the point here, this is actually an animation of known minor planets, basically known small solar system objects, with a few of the big ones thrown in there. Right. The point is that if you kind of look at this, there's Earth right there. A lot of these things cross the orbit of the Earth. They are actually orbiting themselves in such a way that they cross the orbit. And if anything crosses the orbit of anything, there's a possibility that it might run into it, right? That it might hit it. And we kind of already know that something colliding with the Earth is probably going to cause some problems. So, so we need to know about these things. Some of these we already know about. There's actually a lot of impact craters on the surface of the Earth. They're not as visible as they are on other things because, of course, the Earth's geologically active and, kind of fills in its holes, I guess you could say. But we still know about a bunch of these, right? And we know, or we can associate events in the past with negative events in the past with these collisions. Of course, the one that probably gets the most attention is this one in Mexico, Chicxulub, I believe that is how that's pronounced. that's a crater that came from a relatively large object, about 150 kilometers across. That's pretty good size. That's about like from here to, I don't know, the other side of Kansas City, basically. Pretty big, right? Big enough that it made a huge hole in the what's now the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, which, and it was probably also a major part of a huge extinction event, right? And so, obvious lesson there is, something big hits the earth, that's bad for the living things on it. But it doesn't necessarily have, this is a magnetic anomaly map of this crater, and it's really pretty good size. So this is a big enough a problem now that NASA actually has this thing called the Planetary Defense Office, which, I would think if you had a business card that says Planetary Defense Office on it, that is about as cool a thing as you could possibly do. But it's serious. NASA is serious enough about this to be granting, and other agencies as well, and some private foundations, to be granting relatively large amounts of money, not just to professional astronomers, but to volunteer groups as well, to work on basically better understanding the orbits of these things, right? So one of the things that planetary defense consists of is this search, detect, and trace. See their cool thing here, right? This little crest or whatever you want to call it. Very, very cool. And one of the things that is contained under this search, detect, and track, and maybe even under the characterize business, is finding and characterizing the orbits of these things. And this is not just an idle exercise. This is a very important thing. We know now, from example, from that DART mission, when they crashed a probe into a double asteroid a while back, it's possible to kind of move them. Well, you don't necessarily move them. What you do is slow them down a little bit. So if you can crash something into it fast enough, you can change its orbit just slightly. And that, of course, could be hugely important, because if one of these things is on our way to us, and we can, I think the number that sticks in my mind is if you delayed something about the size of not as big as the Chicxulub rock, but on the order of tens of kilometers, if you could delay it by about 3 seconds, it'll miss, right? It just won't won't hit us. And that could save, potentially extinction level events, but certainly massive disruption and loss of life. So this is not just an idle undertaking, right? This is something that is quite important. This is just a little summary of how many and how big these things had. The really, really huge ones, the ones that could be essentially civilization killers, if you will, or even planet killers if they're big enough, we mostly know about. I'm using kind of the royal we here, right? These are mostly known about, right? The ones that are large enough to actually probably cause damage on the scale that the Chicxulub one, they're known, right? And they're also, it's also understood that their orbits are such that they're not immediately hazardous. The solar system's kind of like a weirdly shaped pool table, so anything can happen, but that's okay. I mean, there's about 4 of them that are, big enough to cause a 100-kilometer crater, which would be about on the same order as what basically the Chicxulub event. And then there's about 900 of them that could cause a 10-kilometer crater, that could be a civilization killer. That could, collapse civilization, basically. But you start getting down to these smaller ones here, a few tens or perhaps 100 meters or so. There probably aren't all known. In fact, right now they estimate, this is a couple of years old, but they're estimating 40% of these 140-meter-ish ones are known, which means that, simple subtraction tells us that 60% are not. And of that 40% that are known, the orbits need to be pretty carefully characterized, because you got to know precisely what that orbit might be to determine if it is hazardous, right? That if it does have any potential for hitting us. So something this size could cause a fairly large crater, and if it happened near a major urban area or on an ocean near a major urban area, it could cause a pretty significant loss of life. And then you get down to these even smaller ones here, if it's a 50-meter, which doesn't sound that big, but if it's an iron, right, a piece of a former core that's hard and dense, could again, cause significant local effects. So it's kind of understanding these smaller ones here that I think gets overlooked a little bit. But the other thing about that is the smaller ones are also the dimmer ones, right? Not dimmer because they're smaller, often dimmer because what they're, so their magnitude is less and they're harder to pick out. And that kind of was where our story is sort of headed here, right? So just to give you some idea, this is just for scale, right? This is not intended to be an advertisement or anything. But if you had something about the size of what made Meteor Crater in Arizona, right? Meteor Crater was an iron meteorite, so it caused more meteorite, so it causes more damage than like a stony one would so a smaller one does more damage. It was probably about that big, maybe a little bit bigger, and it caused a hole about that big, miraculously missing the visitor center in the process. But it's, I don't know if you've ever been to this thing, but it's pretty big, right? It's, 3/4 of a mile across, right? Pretty big hole in the ground. If it happened to land right where this one is apparently landing, that's about how big the crater would be. I don't know if you're familiar with Manhattan, but that is centered on that stadium right there. And, it's pretty big. My house is like over here somewhere, and probably would have broken the windows at the very least and probably burned it to the ground from the energy that was released. So the point is that these...
It's nice that it hit right by that visitor center.
Yeah. Very, very neatly missed the visitor center. But so the point here is that even the smallish ones have the potential to cause pretty significant damage, disruption, loss of life, depending on where they hit. So it's important to know not just that they're there. I mean, the discovery piece is more important. It's important to find these things, right? And in fact, there's a number of surveys that I think NASA has about 4 surveys, don't they, that are looking for these. I know the
Probably more than that.
the one in Arizona, the the Catalina Sky Survey is one that's NASA funded. There's one in Hawaii and then there's some private ones or foundation ones as well. So there's a lot of people looking for these things out there, but even once you find them, that doesn't tell you what the orbit is. And so in order to understand what the orbit is, you have to astrometrically they have astrometric measurements have to be made, right? And that's what the Farpoint telescope has mainly been, maybe exclusively been used for. So this is kind of the old software that used to be used for this, but it kind of illustrates this process. Basically, it involves imaging and then kind of finding the thing on there, determining its position rather precisely. That's reported to a kind of a central organization, the Minor Planet Center, which is also part of an international network of similar organizations. And then from that, these orbits are calculated. If you want to do it yourself, there's actually a pretty interesting program called FindOrb that I have not been able to get it to work very well, but anyway. So the point is that it's crucial to be able to, it's a crucial part of this whole process to be reporting these things. So the reason why then we kind of come back to thinking about moving to Tombaugh is in order to do this, and as I mentioned, as the targets become smaller, they become lower, they become bigger magnitudes, dimmer, right? And as we all know, the sky is getting brighter. Light pollution is increasing for a number of reasons, right? One is just there's more people and making lights. And another is that a lot of the nature of the lights, like these LED lights that are becoming more common, are bluer, right? So the point is that it's just getting brighter, and that produces some problems for us because of where the Tombaugh. So this is a map of light pollution, right? So we're here somewhere, and you can kind of see, boy, it seems anywhere east of about here seems like almost a hopeless case. And yet, there's that observatory in Illinois that seems to be doing extremely well on these. But But if we kind of zoom in on this a little bit, well, first of all, the scale that's used to express these is this thing called the Bortle scale. It was actually published not that long ago in Sky and Telescope, I think, because it wasn't a thing when I was in college. I never heard the term until I kind of reconnected. But it kind of goes from Bortle 1, which would be the darkest of dark skies, right? I think the only time I've ever been in a Bortle 1 site was in the middle of a forest in Paraguay, and I literally could not see my hand in front of my face. I could hold it right there and see it. So that's extremely dark. Bortle 2 is considered to be pretty dark, right? Not as dark as 1, but then as you get to bigger numbers, right? So probably the situation at Farpoint has gone, I would say originally maybe a 2.
It was about 2.5, and then it ended up, right now, it's right about 4.
So we've gone from kind of over here somewhere to about here,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And here's what that probably means in terms of affecting the ability to, to see things. And this is a little bit of a rough and ready calculation, because what your limited magnitude for your eyes or anything else depends on a lot of things, right? In the case of a telescope, it depends on how big it is, but it also depends on what the optic train is like. It kind of depends on what sort of sensors you're using on it. And it was really hard to kind of come up with an exact number on all that. It's much easier with your eyes, actually, to figure out what the limiting magnitudes are. But we've gone from this, from about here, right, to about here. And that translates into a magnitude loss, of the way I figured it, of about 0.8 to 1. I don't know, Gary, is that kind of jive with what
Sounds
you
about
think?
right.
So what does that mean? That you lose about a magnitude, right? The magnitude scale is not linear, right? It's kind of a exponential either, but it doesn't proceed in increments of 1. So a magnitude of, say, 20 is not just linearly different from a 19, right? There's a bigger multiplier on that.
It's about 2.58.
2.58 per increment, right? So what that means is, well, first of all, how much has actually changed out there. So this is a historical map, kind of a zoom in historical map. This is 2006, so Farpoint is what, about right here somewhere? This is what the situation was in 2006, which was the earliest map I could find. Here we are in 2022, which is the latest map I can find, and you can see the difference, right? Mostly that's probably from Topeka getting larger and more lights.
Well, I will say also, what's going on is even in rural settings, you have a lot more farmers that have these big bright LEDs now, and they're cheap and they're easy to run, they're easy to put up. So, nobody's going to take lights down. They're always going to put more up. So that's in the rural areas, that's one of the reasons why we're losing much more than we would have just from Topeka Glow and that sort of thing.
And in our case, of course, we've had the issues with the school has put up additional lighting for athletic fields, which some of them we have control over, but most of the new ones we don't necessarily. I mean, it's possible, but it's a much more difficult process. So there's more lights right near the site. And what that probably means, and this is, I'll thank Parker for this, he put these numbers together. Is this still more or less okay, or is there?
No, that's fine, and I looked at a different source late this afternoon and got a comparable type of information.
Okay. So this is basically what this kind of boils down to, basically. So if you look at the sites online where the potential NEO targets are cataloged, this one came from NeoFixer, right?
Yes.
They're prioritized, right? The ones that are the most, the highest priority, and then lesser and lesser, and so on. And Parker's numbers here suggest that if we move the scope, that's the green down here, the priorities that we can, right now, about 10, and this was a sample of what, about 3,700?
3,700.
Yeah, so out of 3,700 that Parker took a look at, we can see this many under the current situation. Blue line here, I guess, would be sort of if a really nice night,
Yeah.
The greens would be what we could manage with a potential move, right? And so you can kind of see that there's a pretty startling difference here. On a good night in the site we're possibly considering, there could be many more priorities. So this kind of gives us, kind of maintains relevancy basically for the work that is being done. So that's why, really. And so I guess in order to kind of kick off the discussion, then I just put together a real quick list of what I think needs to be done, or what we think needs to be done. One is find a new location, which Gary, maybe we can talk a bit about. I do actually have a map. I tried to keep it as vague as possible because I know there's privacy issues and things like that. So I hope you don't mind if I fill them out. So it's around here somewhere would be the proposed new site. That's not quite it exactly. Like I said, I'm trying to keep it a little bit vague, but that's where the new site is. Current location right now is about Wardle 4, I guess. This is where we are now. Here would be the new location. It's Wardle 2, maybe 2+, but
I'd say it's about 2.5 to 3, maybe, in that range.
so, but clearly darker, much darker than the current location, and again, that enables us to start getting these more priority targets here a little bit. So as far as what needs to be done, of course, we need to find a location, which the Crest Family Ranch has been considering that as a site. What would need to be done is, again, this is probably more to it than this, but of course we'd have to build a building, right, a new structure to put it in. That would probably require some prep and access, site prep. I don't know, would this need a slab?
It kind of depends on which way you want to go. They have, there's a construction company that's called Backyard Observatories.
And this is
I have plans for a 16 by 24 here building, which would just pretty much meet all of our needs. It would give us an 8 by 16 warm room that we could put the computers in, electronic equipment, all the other devices that we might be needing to use out there. And that gives you a 16 by 16 open observatory once the roof rolls off. Now, our scope now doesn't need as much room as it used to need now that it's a shorter tube. So I think we could get by with an area that's, maybe even 14 by 14 or something like that would be fine. It would work within that. That's going to crowd it a little bit, but it should work fine without any other adjustment. Anyway, so that, and those numbers down there, the deck options, so on and so forth, I wouldn't believe those numbers very much. That's on an old website that they've had for a long time. They haven't updated it for a while. And I'm guessing you could pretty much double those values right now. Anyway, I haven't got any more information back from them except for the drawings that they have. And anybody wants to take a look at these can take a look at them and see how they put things together if you understand architectural drawings, which I have some issues with. But so anyway, it gives you kind of a rough idea of what we're up against as far as costs. You can go either have a slab poured, concrete slab poured, to put this frame on, or they will build a floor, a wood floor. Okay, raise it up and have a little accent, panel underneath. Basically, raise the floor up a little bit off the ground, so you have a gap in between. And frankly, for the cost of concrete these days and having concrete moved out there and have it finished off, might be better just to do a wood floor anyway. But anyway, that's something we can decide at some point down the road if we get that far. Now, let me put a little thing more out here.
Okay.
Actually, this is the rough idea, and I'll pass this one around. This is the rough idea of what it would look like from full-scale drawing. Gives you kind of some sense of how it would work. We're talking about a lot of money, and we're talking about a lot of move, and we're talking about a lot of permission from the Crest family. And depending on how they want to approach this, if they want to approach it at all. And I don't know, Lynn, do you want to say a few words?
Well, I guess the deal is this is my parents' farm slash ranch down south of Council Grove, and when they passed away, everything went into a trust, and I have one brother and one sister, and all three of us are in charge of it. And we lease out the pasture land for cattle, and that's pretty much all it does anymore. There's nobody lives there. They sold their house and about 10 acres to another couple, and they're kind of like in the middle of our property along a county road. But nobody else lives out there, so we don't live out there. We just run, we lease it out for cattle. So I grew up there, and skies were pretty dark. Did a lot of work with my little Sears refractor out in front of the house, but it's still about as dark. So when I heard you were looking for a place to move it to, it's saying like, well, gee whiz, we've got some property, why not? You know, so I talked to my brother and my sister. My brother's all for it. My sister's going, oh, I don't know, yeah, but she's outvoted. So, so I think we can probably work a deal where we can carve out a little plot next to an access road and get something going. It's going to be more on your end for, you know, finding the funding and all that kind of stuff for us. It's just, here's a plot of land. There would have to be, there's a fence. Like I said, we have cattle run, so we'd have to put in another gate, and probably you'd have to have a fence around your building to keep the varmints out, or the cattle out. I'm not sure about the wood floor, because things might want to live under it, but
Sure.
That'd be something we'd have to consider. But as far as whether this is doable on our end, I think it is. It's really kind of more whether you can afford to move it.
Right.
Just as an aside, I don't know how many knew Lindley Johnson, who was here at the dedication of when you put it in, this last scope got put in. He and I grew up together, and he grew up on a farm west of us out by Wilsey, Kansas, and I don't think they have the property anymore, and I haven't reached out to him. I don't know if anybody has, but I'm going to try and see if I can get a hold of him now that you're actually serious about doing the move, and see if there's something that he could do on his end, maybe to kind of facilitate things, because he has an interest in the area, and if they still have property, which I don't think they do, that might be a good spot too. So I'll see if I can get a hold of him, unless somebody else has already reached out to him.
I will say that after talking with Lindley, now I'm going to get everybody confused here.
Too many limbs.
But if I talked with Lynn about going out and doing a little survey, and I went out and I took one night right after a full moon, about 3 nights after full moon, so I didn't have a lot of time. But by the time it got dark out there, I could not see a light in any direction from the position I was in. Now, maybe I was down a little lower than some of them, but the point is that it is a very dark sky, and there isn't very many lights out there at all. The most light pollution I saw was from Emporia, which was to the southeast, about, I don't know, 20, 25 miles, something like that.
At least 25.
Yeah, maybe close to 30.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a very dark sight. And that night was a decent night. It was a good night. But the only light pollution came from the football field in Council Grove, which was about 6 miles away, because they had lights on. They were having a game. So that's not gonna be a normal condition.
But there are a few hills between
Yes.
there and town that kind of block
Yeah,
that.
it helps to block things out, yes. So anyway, I was very impressed with the darkness of that site. Okay. I think it would be a good place for a transfer of the tomball. Now, the big thing, I think, and with Lynn helping on kind of being a go-between between us and his family, it all seems to be a very amenable thing, and I want to thank you guys for considering it. Financing is going to be really a big deal. It's going to be a very tough sell, I think, to get this thing financed. It's going to be challenging. I think we can probably do it, and if we play our cards right, I think we can get it done. Yes?
I just had a question.
Yes.
Being devil's advocate. Okay, where the site is located,
Mhm.
how much ground around that does the Crest family own?
I
Yeah.
can
Well,
say
yeah,
that.
what I'm thinking is if somebody buys a couple over there and decides they wanna put in a dance club or some dumb thing.
There
We've had
won't
that
be.
kind of-
Right.
Yeah, I know, but that you,
There's
how much
never,
area do we have
you
around there?
never have 100% here.
Right,
You
well, I
never
know
can
that.
have that.
But that's why, I don't know that area. I mean,
It's all pasture.
It's all pasture right
It's
now,
all
and it's not
pasture.
close to
Everything-
anything where anybody's gonna
Everything
live
west of
over here,
there is
right?
all pasture. There aren't even, and south,
Mhm.
west of there are no roads.
I kinda wondered about that.
It's
Yeah,
all
so
pasture.
we're not gonna have to, in this
Yeah.
case, you wouldn't have to worry about
The only thing
somebody
would be
buying
what-
the land next door
No,
and deciding to.
no,
build a
there's
club.
no,
It's not
there's no
tied
way
to
there's gonna be any
anything.
development
It's
there.
How
a
far away
pretty
is the school?
stable area.
What school is it?
Huh?
What school is it? Council Grove
Yep.
High?
What about utilities? Is there?
That's really the big question, would be power.
Probably to go with solar power.
I think solar is probably a good possibility in this case. I think solar would handle most of what you need out there. Rolling off the roof and bringing it back in is probably the biggest power source, power energy eater. But that's 2 minutes, on and off, so.
What about, is there water available?
No, it is not gonna be, let me stress this is not gonna be a public observatory as such. It's not gonna be open to the public, it's not even gonna be open basically to the membership. We're gonna use this as a remote operated station,
So you will keep the public aspect still out at the school.
still at the school.
Right.
Well, I think we would still need to have a conversation about what to do with the current Farpoint, but definitely it would stay as the publicly accessible part of the club's mission.
I'll bring up another point on that, and that is that there's a weirdo by Carbondale who has a pretty good sized scope that would probably be willing to donate his scope to put out there. So it's a 22-inch f4.5. So we could replace the scope that we've got out there with the 22-inch and use it. Even under like polluted conditions, it's still gonna be darker than my site. So, and I, thinking a little more long-term, my wife is not gonna be able to do much with that scope after I'm gone. So I'm guessing that she would be appreciative of the donation to Farpoint. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. One thought I had, which I think yours idea is better, one thought I had is that, my telescope is out there in that right now, not doing anything, but it could be something that, host member scopes.
Actually, you could probably have 3 or 4
Yeah.
kind of scopes in that area. We could take the 16-inch that's in the Kessler, for example, and move it into that building. The amount of swing that I need for the 22-inch is about typical with what the 27-inch is right now. So it's kind of on the same lines. If
Seems to
need
me way
be,
back in the dark ages that there were some other occasions
Oh,
set up
sure,
in
sure.
in
We
that
used to have
area
some
by
12-inch
the
LX
homeowners,
200s.
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's been used that way before.
yeah. So, anyway, the idea here is, you know, we have options of how to use, and I don't think there's any reason to, you know, like tear the observatory down or anything like that. I think we can still use the facilities out there, and like I say, we could bring in the 22-inch and use that out there also, so.
Well, it is the club's, you know, FirePoint belongs essentially to the club, and people can still go out and take their own scopes out and do
Sure.
all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
It's still darker than any place around here.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
Especially,
microwave and
especially if we get out there, if we're out there physically. The nice part about it is we can shut most of those lights off. So we have that option, but there has to be some physical presence. We can't remote it and do that. Okay?
Yeah, and that's been a limiting since we've been running the combo more and more remotely, which has been great for me because it saves me an hour drive to get out there and an hour drive to get home. But the trade-off is the lights.
Yeah.
They cannot be turned off.
So really, this building would be just for the big telescope that you run remote now, and it's gonna be out just kind of by itself, and so
Yes.
it,
Yeah, there won't be, I mean, you know, you can have a situation where you might have like a local high school class that's interested in science, and then you might bring them out and show them around the facility, but in general, it's not gonna be open to the public. That's the concept anyway. Anyway, the funding is an issue, and I refer to Angel, who is somewhat familiar with this area. Funding is difficult. I really hate to put myself on the line here because I've had 3 different sets of funding sources that were pretty large that I was able to secure. And you know, I've got like 100% right now. If I go into this, I'm gonna get turned down a lot. I'm gonna have to do that. So.
Happy to team up there.
Yeah, okay, well, how about taking the lead? I will help with somebody who wants to head the, you know, the fundraising. And I, you know, obviously I'm not gonna be completely out of this picture, but I really don't think I got the energy and effort anymore to take the lead. So I really would be more than happy to be, you know, a follow-up.
I think there's probably multiple sources. I mean, I think there's definitely grant opportunities. I think there's some corporate opportunities too, and there's probably some individual giving opportunities. Probably lots of different potential sources that we could look at.
Yeah, I think it's a legitimate cause, and I think people could rally behind it. But
one of the things that I guess I would like, maybe, I mean, first of all, I guess we should kind of decide as a group, do we want to do this?
right,
That's what, one of the major intents, I think, of this meeting, and I don't know what would constitute a quorum or what sort of, if any, sort of vote we need to take on this, but, I mean, like Gary said, this would be a huge undertaking.
it's big. It's
And,
several years long. It's not going to happen overnight.
And I think we need to, you know, have a consensus from the club that this is something that members would be supportive of. I mean, that's how would I think. I don't know how the rest of you see that.
I think we have to do it that way. I just don't see any other, because.
Well, then how do we determine that? Do we poll people? Do we just say we have a quorum here, let's
You probably would
vote?
have to have, I would think you would have to have an informational mailing or something like that beyond just the people in this room, for
Yeah,
one thing.
and you know, I tried to
Yeah.
get people to come here because I was hoping that maybe this meeting would kind of at least get that process started. I mean, you know, we got a good turnout. Thank you all for for coming, but,
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, because there are other members, you know, that aren't here or whatever, but I think we have to make sure we've got a real good buy-in on it.
yeah,
Basically.
absolutely.
Because the last thing we need is for, you know, to get started on this and then have a whole bunch of grumbling. Not that that's ever happened before in the history of anything, but, I've been here about as long, almost as long as Gary, so yeah, we have history, so. But I think that's mandatory. I think we just have to do that.
Well, the-
That's a
Roughly how
club
many
where-
members are there? I mean, there's like, I don't know, 15, 20 people here.
30, was it 33, 34, something like that?
Something.
So roughly half of
Yeah,
membership.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, do we actually have a club rule on quorums if we decide that we want to actually put this to a vote?
The only quorum we have that we have to keep is our board meetings.
Boards, okay.
Boards have quorums, but I don't think our general
So
population does.
so it doesn't
We-
matter.
No, you
You
could,
could probably do like a simple majority. of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, we have 17 here right now. So what's the official, membership count? It's around that.
Third, I thought it was third.
Yeah, I think it's in there. That's something we have to, you know, and we but definitely have to have at least the majority.
well, let me ask the question. Is there anybody here that doesn't think this is a good idea? I mean, no repercussions.
Yeah.
Now, is there anybody that has more questions about all of this?
Oh, probably
And why we're
tons.
trying to do it?
Probably tons.
If you're not leading it, Gary, who's leading it?
I know.
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's something that's occurred to me. I mean, I think I'm probably the second senior person in the club after Gary right now.
Probably, yeah.
I
you're
mean,
all-
my God, yeah.
You get almost half as much time as I do.
Well, I mean, man, yeah, no, I think I joined the club, I was just thinking this on the way out in,
Mhm.
1996 at the end
Mhm.
of 1996.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
just
so,
before
yeah.
we opened up, I think.
Yeah, cause I brought cookies for the opening,
Mhm.
yes, yes.
Yep.
We were still talking, you were still talking about that.
That's when I could eat cookies.
Well, still eat them, it's just what the price you pay. But yeah, cause I was in on, I remember one of the first meetings that I was at, they had a picture of the Parkman sign.
Mhm.
So it was really, really early on.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I almost wondered, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Well, no, I was just gonna say but anyway, it's just one of those things, you know, we go through a lot of different things and you know, you have ups and downs just like everything else, but we really do need to have people understand what we're doing, because you don't want to have a little clique start rumbling,
Yeah.
which we have.
Well, I think maybe a couple things might help with that. One of them is what I kind of started to do a little bit tonight, which is to have the pitch, to have what the argument is, why we need to do this, so that maybe translate it into a different form so that, you know, members who don't come in person couldn't get it. The other thing I think we need to have is a really solid estimate of how much it's gonna cost. That way we know what we're asking. We have a better idea what we're asking. As far as the leadership question, which I think is a really key question that Russ asked, I mean, I hate to use the C word, but maybe we need to kind of think about a committee
That's what I was gonna say.
that,
That's a little world we didn't say.
that, and I would be willing to, I mean, my day job is, you know, knock wood, gonna be ramping down here in the next 1 to 5 years, so, hopefully the shorter end of that. So, you know, I'm hoping I have a little bit more time. I mean, Angel, this is something I think, you know. you'd
Yeah, well,
be-
that's what I was gonna say. I think a committee could be good, cause, you know, I have fundraising experience and expertise, but I don't have some of the technical expertise other people. I mean, I think if we could have a committee that have people with different kinds of expertise will be helpful, cause I don't know that one person can do it all.
Well, should we, you know, call for volunteers?
And that way we get other people outside the board involved.
Right, which I think would be else too. I mean, do we call for volunteers on that?
I think once we know that we're gonna do it, then I think that's.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, we want to establish, the first thing we want to establish is this something we want to do? You know, understanding that it's gonna be a monumental project.
Well, and I haven't had access to the membership rules for some years now, but the other thing too is that we have a lot of members that are just interested in astronomy and don't actually do it or anything like that. And one of the first, well, see, I know Gary, and I'm saying maybe it's his sister, blah, 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 blah. Okay, what happens if, when Gary's gone, one way or another? Then what?
When
Is
they
that
take
something
away.
to consider? I hate to say that, but, I mean, Cindy, I wouldn't take on her on any time if I had, that's Gary's wife, but that is one thing we're talking about. It's gonna take a while to get the money together, we're gonna have a really nice thing out there, and then, what if Gary gets, shot by a jealous husband or something? Do we have that?
Wow. We're really stretching now.
Feel the love,
Well,
man.
you drive in
Feel
a
the
long
love.
way. I've driven that road you drive in, and there's some crazy people out there. But I mean, I'm really, we're
We
talking
put his,
about
we put his
long-term
boots on the
commitment,
fence
and we're
post and we keep on
That's
moving.
right. Yeah, how many people actually are using the system that's set up now in terms of getting in on the remote? And
Parker, Doug, and I right now because you have to go through kind of a training process to get into, the use of it all. Because it's a little tricky. I mean, these guys will tell you it's a lot to know. So.
But I think that's a good question and I think the whole discussion here is a good one because, not to put too fine a point on it, but we kind of skew toward the upper end of the age range a little bit. And I think, one of the things that I sometimes worry about is that, how do we get younger people involved in this that might actually want to do this? And, to me, I consider anybody under 40-ish to be a younger person, But,
They only wanna do it if it's on their cell phone, that's kind of the way it is.
But that's kind of drifting off into another topic, which I think at some point it would be good to consider is, how do we kind of, and my time in the club is short enough that I don't know how the history of all that, if there were young pups and now there aren't, but,
Some of us were young pups back then.
but I think it's, and I don't know what is gonna happen with my
What's
life
the
over the
pond
next
you
few
fish
years.
from? I mean, is it just Topeka? Or do you fish from
I live in
Kansas
Manhattan.
City as
I live
well?
in Manhattan.
So if you have, if you're doing things remotely, then maybe you need to expand the net.
Well, one of
Look
the
at
things
Kansas City.
one of the things I like about this is that it's, it goes from, if I have to go out there, it goes from being an hour drive to being about a half-hour drive. So in that respect, it works just fine for
That
me.
sounds like somebody volunteering to do anything.
Well, I think I've already kind of been volunteered for that, but that's fine. And I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, where I will end up, living the rest of my life once the professional part of it ends. I don't know, And it's,
Have you approached KU's astronomy?
I have not. I have some contact with them. I used to know a couple of the professors there, the husband and wife team, Bruce and Barbara Torlock, but they've since retired and they've been kind of out of the department now for quite a number of years. I do know a few of them. Alex Polanski, who kind of receives the mirror for KU, and then when we were able to trade that out. And Greg, I can't think of Rednick, who I think at this point at least was the chair, but I'm not sure he still is. So anyway, I have some loose connection with some of them, and we could certainly, contact there. Yes.
Well, because several of Washburn's got a astronomy program, and I suppose K-State does, don't they?
not really. There's a guy who retired a couple years back who taught introductory astronomy, but is not really an astronomer necessarily. There's a guy who's actually affiliated with our club who's a cosmologist, but he's a theorist, so he writes on the board all day. Other than that, no, there really isn't.
Who on Washburn is still there that we used to?
Who was the woman that we talked to?
Karen Camarda?
Yeah, she's the head of it right now.
Yeah.
She is.
She's the head of the department.
She's talked to us before, she knows.
But I know there's a really active club in Lawrence that
I think this is all good discussion, but I think it's getting a cart in front of the horse. I think
Well,
I think
I'm
you're
trying
right.
to see-
I mean, I
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from, but we haven't even made the commitment yet, so.
Well, and that's, see, one of the
It's hard to
reasons that-
approach other people
Yeah,
before that.
and what I'm trying to do is just when we make this commitment, it's gonna be a long-term commitment.
Oh, it
That's what
will
I'm
be,
saying.
sure.
And how are we gonna make sure that it doesn't just turn into a dusty, barn out there someplace, 10 years down the road or something. And that's why we've gotta get some understanding of the support and who's willing to do it and all this other kind of stuff, because I would hate to see that built and then, a couple of years later, nobody did it.
Yeah.
That's what I, because, and I mentioned the cell phones, but the thing is, what I see in so many people now is that we like going out and looking at stuff and whatever, and I still, show people around, oh, that's so cool, but so many of them, they don't want to do it, they just want to see some other people do it. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm seeing developing a lot, and it bugs me. Anyway, I'm just thinking in terms of we can't just set it up for what'll work right now. We've got to look long term. We're going to do.
Well,
Because
and
this thing's going to be worth keeping around and using.
And I think to your point, there is gonna be a lot of attention drawn into this area from the club that's gonna probably detract away from their general activities. I think that's likely to happen. So you have to consider that too.
Yeah, it's
So,
it's one of those things that I just when you get something like this, you want to make sure that we've got a continuation of it. I mean, as it is, I haven't been able to pull my scope out in a long time for physical reasons. I just found up in another one. But when we get kids out there and they're so interested, the problem is they get pulled away over time. But some of the
sure.
adults will stick with it.
There's a few,
Yeah.
a small percentage
You
that
don't
will
need
stick
very
with
many.
But
it.
it's always been like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
It's
right.
always
Yes.
been like that. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that when
I
I was
just-
going to school.
Yeah,
It's just-
and
there were only
so,
2 or 3 of us in the whole school that did this. The rest of them were all football players. I mean.
Yeah, I'm
it's the way it is.
just thinking in terms of continuity. It's
I
gonna
don't
take us a
think
while
it's
to do
changed a
this,
bit.
for one thing. I mean, if we started tomorrow, when do you think this would be done?
2.5, 3 years from now.
There you go, okay.
But that's
That's my
Yeah,
estimate.
that
And it will take at least 2 years, and it could
Mhm.
be as long as 3 years.
Mhm.
That's kind of the range I'm thinking it might be in. Now, it could go a lot quicker. If we ended up with a lot of funding, we can get a lot more stuff done quicker.
Mhm.
But my guess is it's gonna take several years
Yeah,
to.
well,
to
if we get a
this.
lot of quick funding like that, then the cattle in the next field have been flying by that time, cause it's just not gonna, we haven't run into that before. We could, but it would be nice.
And that said, we got a brand new mirror within a year. So.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of, I mean, there is kind of a, I think in some ways having a discussion about sustainability of the club is a kind of a good thing to talk about, but what you're saying is true regardless of whether we build a facility or not.
That's right.
If we just, if we decide we're gonna say, we're just gonna stay the course. The danger of that is that, or the risk of that is that we become so obsolete that interest falls off because of that, right? If we, come to a point where we really can't do cutting edge work, or at least, leading edge work, we lose one of the things that, to be honest with you, attracted me to the club. I mean, I showed up one night basically out of curiosity, and I kept coming back largely because what I saw here was more than just kind of discussion. People were doing things, and that was a huge draw for me. And I don't know how many more of me's are out there, but I know there's got to be some. So, we just need to figure out how to get them in here, and hopefully they'll be a little younger than us.
Well, to your point, it might be useful at some point to have a discussion with some of the graduate students and advisors at KU. There's a history in that department of people who got their astronomy degree at KU, then went on and got their PhD at Arizona or someplace like that. We've actually done some of the cutting research on the asteroids.
Mm-hmm.
And,
there was a guy who just recently retired, right? That was the head of one of those. He was a KU PhD, maybe. That was the head of one of the NASA offices or something.
Actually, there's a group of them. I think a lot of them are down in Arizona now, and you've got a couple that's in the major observatories scattered around. And so there's a history there, and I've got to think that there are people in that graduate program that would just love to have hands-on experience, because a lot of stuff that they do now, they're sitting at computers looking at a screen.
Yeah. You know,
So, but we're gonna get them involved so that they can look at more screens.
That's right.
I mean, you know,
That's a hands-on thing.
But they're operating an instrument.
That's right.
That is
what they've got control. They don't have to sit around writing the grants and waiting for their 12 hours on a cloudy night.
right, on a telescope that's in Hawaii.
That's right.
So, you know, and I think that's a great point. Is that one of the things that we could potentially offer is, you know, not the biggest glass, but access.
Yeah.
And
With the additional light pollution that's going on, what are we losing at Farpoint? Is it just the NEO stuff, or is
it's several different things actually. You don't have accessibility to the full sky if you get down close to those lights where they're at. It kind of washes things out there too. So not only do you have the northeast covered by Topeka and goes up about 45, 50 degrees, then we've got lights now that are south and southwest of us that are almost directly in our
can we see
line
the
of sight.
outside? Do you think it would show some of the light?
Yeah.
Well, and on that point, you know,
You can go to
the
some
window
website.
that we have to look at these things is so narrow that you could be out there for several hours one night and the light ascensions aren't right. You know, unless you, like Derek, can squeeze light out of a black hole, you're really limited on which of the NEOs of interest you can actually pick up.
Yeah, that's true.
So this is the night, the all-sky camera, which is a nice night out there. But you can kind of see here if you look at
That's current, by the way.
Yeah, this is current. So this is to the south, which is the direction that the Tombaugh mainly points, right? And that's, I think, probably because of the asteroid. You know, that's the direction you look for these things. And so you can see the lights right there. Some of those I think we can turn off, but a lot of them we can't.
Well, we can turn off the parking lot lights remotely, but those are the only ones. The yard lights that are in the front of the school and on the side of the school, we can't do anything about those remotely. And we can't do anything remotely about the ball diamond lights that are on every night.
Yeah, and then this would be towards Topeka, right?
Yes.
So that's the
Yep,
Topeka.
So it
sky.
shows you how much Topeka has encroached also.
they're leaving the ball diamond lights on, or?
No, not the ball diamond lights, but the entryway lights.
Oh.
So it's for the sidewalk. And they also have a flagpole light that's got this big mega light pointing straight up.
Which they're, you know, displaying the flag properly. You're supposed to have a light on it if it's on there. But you know, unfortunately, that kind of,
Yeah.
you know, so
Well,
they're
Cheaper
properly
than
displaying
hiring
the
a
flag.
custodian to
but-
go out and take it down. That's what you have to do.
Yeah, and they don't wanna have to mess with that. It's a matter of convenience and security, supposedly security for them, because,
Sure.
one of the things that they mentioned, was a big concern of theirs was having security lights so nobody would do vandalism like it's helped them before.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna
That's
say, all that does is let them draw in more, you know, distinct fashion. Yeah, that's one thing that, and I, you know, doing my stuff with Dark Sky, and I did some research on it, and others have done research, and they have found out lights are not that big of a, you know, if you're out there
No, they're
out
not.
in the boonies.
They just make it easier for the
Yeah.
criminals
Right,
to
Exactly.
actually, there's
see.
a well-known one where there was a building that they were having trouble with vandalism. The lights burned out because it was like a school during the summer. They didn't have vandalism when there wasn't any light to light up their stuff. So, you know, but that's an old argument that we don't want to deal with. So
Yeah.
Well, I
They
mean,
studied the crime increased in the areas that they put more lights in.
Yep,
Yep.
yep.
but I guess kind of maybe
And they've been non-blaming loans.
just to sort of think about how to organize all this then, or what we need to do.
Are we recording this meeting tonight by chance? Too late to ask now.
I don't know, are we, Russ?
Yep.
So, I mean, so what are the steps that, I mean, if we, as I understand it, the first thing we need to decide is, do we want to move forward with this, right?
That'd be my,
Is it-
that'd be what I would guess.
So, in order to determine that, do we poll the membership via email and say?
Yes, I think you do an email. Well, I think if you have a recording of tonight, since we did do a presentation tonight and kind of walk it through, I think you could send out this recording of this meeting to folks.
Okay,
And then from that, invite people if they have
To
more
comment.
questions or comments or things like that, and say give people some time before you then request an actual vote.
okay.
I think that's exactly what we need to do is.
So I can do that.
Yeah, get the
And
whole.
then once you do that, then I think we need to put that committee together.
Yeah, so that would be the next step, determine who would be on that committee.
And we need a preliminary estimate of what the cost might be.
Right, yeah, I think
Yeah,
that'd be great.
I can probably get you some of that. I've been trying to work with a few people to get some estimate about what it costs to bring concrete out.
Yeah.
From Council Grove, I don't know if Council Grove
Yeah,
has
yeah,
do they
yeah,
have
they do.
concrete?
Yeah, they
Okay.
do. Yeah, they do.
To see how much it
Maybe
would
later,
cost to
let
bring
me
out
do
the
that for us.
concrete and finish it off.
I think when you send out the recording, I think you can send out the recording, send out a cost estimate, send out the drawing that Gary passed by to that we passed around.
I don't know if I can do that or not because it's their property, so.
No, not the map, but just the schematic.
Oh,
the
okay,
map.
sure.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah, I
right,
don't,
right.
I
The
don't.
general consensus of
That
what the
picture that
building-
showed the, kind of what the building would look
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
Yes.
Are there other buildings, are those buildings that were in that picture, are they there, or is that,
This one, you
was
mean?
that just kind of a, yeah, there looks like there's a building, a
This-
couple buildings back over there, are they actually there, or is that just?
This-
No, this isn't anything this is this company who has built these
Oh,
observatories.
okay,
Right.
so
And
that's
it's
not,
their,
that's not
yeah.
it.
It's-
That's
No,
not-
no, right.
okay.
It would be similar to that, though.
This
That
is
was-
from their website, and they make ones that are, 6x6 and all the way up to,
Oh.
I think this is the biggest one they make, isn't it?
That's the biggest one they have standard. Now, they do have, you can go bigger, but, of course, they'd have to estimate it more costly, but.
That was stupid.
But I think a 16-foot by 16-foot interior with a 8 by 16 area where we could put all the electronics that we need, all that other stuff. And think about this, you're gonna have some place to put the electronics for solar if you're doing solar and batteries
And
and that sort
batteries
of
and
thing.
stuff, yeah.
So I think it's I don't think we could have just a blank building out there without kind of a controlled area
Yeah.
to put this electronics in.
So it shows this one sitting on a slab. If we went with the option of not a slab, which I understand might have its own set of problems, would we need to sink a pier then?
You're gonna have to do something like that, yeah. You can't set it on the wooden floor.
No, not on a wooden floor.
Yeah.
If you're doing a wooden deck, no, you'd have to set in 3 points.
Yeah.
3 piers points, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
If you're not doing that, if you've had go with a standard concrete floor, I think we'd be fine. I don't think we'd have to have anything special other than that standard concrete floor. It's what it's sitting on right now. Of course, our observatory, I think, is about a 4-inch thick floor. It's a little bigger than most foundation or
Just-
not driveway or flooring. It's just slightly bigger. So thicker, I mean.
What's the Kessler got? Or the floor on the Kessler building?
It's a standard 3.5 inch.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think let's face it, you're not gonna have a lot of people walking around it
Well,
if you're
even-
remotely operating it.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna have the need to have it isolated,
Yeah.
just
okay.
saying. That won't be an extra cost we're gonna have to deal with. Some telescopes, you'll have to have a center pier, and you'll have to bury that down pretty deep. But because it's spread out, it's not as big a deal with this particular telescope. So it's positioned in 3 points. Anyway, and if some reason you have to modify that and build, and it's easy to put a pier in 3 places and do that. So it's not a big deal either way. Just a little bit of added cost and time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it would have to be well done and leveled, just to.
Yeah, well, professionally leveled, and here's the thing, I don't envision us doing much of the work out there. I think we need to contract it out. I think Lynn might agree with me on this too. We're not professional builders, and we're likely to make a few mistakes along the way. And I just as soon have somebody that's experienced do this.
Yeah, this isn't a DIY.
No.
Construction project.
Exactly.
You did it when you built Farpoint.
We built Farpoint ourselves, but we had some pretty good talented people to help with that. Jan Pavlaka, who was a long time gone, away from the club. Anyway, he had a lot of construction experience and could do the electrical and all that. So we had some talented people doing that at that
Yeah,
time.
it was already finished when I joined up, so. I did cookies for
So I think if you send all this out as a package in the email, so the video, the pricing, some of those attachments, all those things kind of together in one email, and then give people a week or two to ask questions and comment and that sort of thing.
Okay,
that.
well, I can.
You definitely want to include the stuff about that thing like you have there with the asteroids, why we're doing it, that kind of.
Well, that would be in the video.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we can. Sorry, go ahead, Kerry.
I was just going to say, okay, I lost my train of thought. Got derailed pretty easily. Okay, and I'll come back to it. Go ahead and keep going. If I remember it, I'll try to keep it.
Okay. So I'm hearing that what I think what I would need to do is provide people with some sort of a cost estimate, right? Which.
Yeah, and that's going to be kind of difficult to do because you don't go by that.
Right.
I'm guessing that is 10 years old.
Well, and this is partial. This is just the building. Right?
Yes.
Right. And
right.
there'd be other stuff. So
there will absolutely be other stuff. The other thing we haven't even discussed here was that we have to have a good internet.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
There is a tower. It's a Verizon tower. I don't know how many people have antenna off of that tower. Okay.
That's a pretty critical thing we need to put.
Yeah, but it's about 5 to 6 miles away. It's on the south side of Council Grove, which is kind of a benefit to us. It's up pretty high. It's a tall tower. So I think we can shoot that, and not with a gun, but we can shoot it through.
Who owns the tower?
Line of sight.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right. So I think that would be good, but I don't know much more than that. I've not investigated. I've tried to find some internet sources from around, rural internet sources from around that area.
Starlink would be another possibility.
Starlink is another possibility if we absolutely have to.
That's like
Sleeping with the enemy.
Yeah, playing with the devil.
That is
exactly.
That is definitely letting the wolf into the house. But
yeah, it's if we have to, we have to. But I'm hoping we can go to some other source.
well, so could we, by we I guess I mean you, come up with a reasonable estimate that we could send out to people?
Yeah, I'm not very good with reasonable estimates. I tend to underpower them.
Well, the solar requirement is going to be difficult to ascertain as far as your power requirements. So you're probably going to need at least 10 kilowatts, maybe.
We don't need that much.
Do you think 5 kilowatts is all
Are,
you need?
are those sold as systems?
Pretty sure. Yeah.
You usually get a 5 kilowatt batteries as part of battery pack, so it usually goes in 5 kilowatts. So you're going to need solar power to be able to charge 5 kilowatts.
Well, I don't think we need to have this down to the penny. I think what we need
Right.
is,
No.
is range.
need a range.
Around
Yeah.
range, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
So
you
price
just make
cost,
it known
yeah.
that this is an estimate, it's not a final.
Yeah, when you start figuring everything out, and you look at this and you're saying, wow, that's not that much, it's only 15,000, 16,000, that's not very much. It's 3 times that estimate, probably, I would guess,
That's just
for
for the
that.
building.
For the building.
Yeah.
And, and that's if you put your own concrete in. Slab option's only 11,000, see that, which would be probably 35,000 right now.
Plus whatever it costs with the.
Plus the cost of concrete. Then you're talking about the internet, the solar. You may be able to come off of a transformer line out there and bring power in that way. But you're talking about a pretty expensive project to do that, because you're probably looking at coming in about 500 feet, maybe. Maybe
It's
even
gonna be
closer to 1,000.
quarter mile, just about, to the actual high tension line that's going through there. It's gonna be close to a quarter mile away. So you'd have to put in poles and.
Yeah.
You know, that's not
There's a
small.
transformer that's alongside the road where that house, was that, it used to be your house?
Yeah.
There's
But
still a
we're-
transformer
but
there,
We're
I
talking
think.
about being up here.
Right.
So this is down the hill, this is along the creek.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the power line goes right through here.
Right.
So
But there's no poles, there's no transformers on those. And you
not
have
that
to-
I know,
and
un-
the
until
only
you, until you
transformer
get to here.
to the house,
Yeah.
where the house is.
But, you know, if you had a gajillion dollars, you could tap off they could put you a transformer on here and run
Right.
poles over to here, but it would be, it's probably close to a quarter mile, maybe not quite.
Or hopefully maybe,
Eighth to a quarter.
or hopefully even maybe underground from the transformer here. Going to
They
the
wanted,
underground line.
Yeah,
they
but
wanted-
anyways, that's
yeah,
another.
They wanted
another kind of thing.
$250,000 to run a cable just across the street
Jesus. Well,
to one of to the weather service office where I work at.
Yeah, but they've got a lot of money though.
No. So it was ridiculous. Just to give you an idea of what they want
Yeah.
for ridiculous
Yeah, that-
aspects.
Well, I don't think we need the super precise estimate now. We just, or a
No,
super
no, I,
precise number now.
I
We just need a
understand,
ballpark. And, you know, when we start to look for, kind of beat the bushes for money on this, it could be that we go to more than one source, but we're gonna need pretty solid numbers by then. But.
Right
I
now,
think
you're just trying to get approval from the membership.
From the membership,
Yeah,
I
so
think we, you know.
that's all you're doing
Like I said,
right now.
one step at a time here.
Right.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
so it sounds to me like that's the next step we need to take. So if I can get that information, I can get that out to, I can kind of ping the members, let them know what's going on, which they kind of should know already, but give them a little bit of a rundown of what we did here today. Access to I guess the video will be on YouTube, right?
5K?
So,
Yeah.
you know, tell them, here's the video if you want to see the
Sure.
whole spiel. Here's what we think it's going to cost. Here's what we want to do. If we want to include any of these other maps or graphs or something, I don't know if we want to include the maps necessarily, but, you know,
I think it'd be.
anything you think ought to go with this.
I think we just say it's a general location that's about 6 miles south of Council Grove.
And
That's
it's property,
enough.
currently on property owned by a member.
Yeah.
Right.
Although
And I would like to-
Oh my God, we might have to bring a lawyer in. Oh.
Yep.
Is there a lawyer in the house?
No, they're all at the bar by now.
They're at the state capitol, I think.
Yeah. We won't tell anybody. And I would like to just kind of keep the ball rolling on this. So if we could get to that pretty soon.
So is there any more information that you need from me to do this outside of just estimates on the cost?
Estimates on the cost. Any of the diagrams you think we might want to
Yeah.
send out?
Just get out your checkbook, that's all we need.
Right.
But,
That'll take care of a lot of it.
And if anybody's got any
yeah.
suggestions about, what to include in this, I'm
I
always
would
open.
definitely include the part about why we got light pollution problems at Parkland.
Okay,
I
I mean,
think
I can write a little, background.
I mean, it'll be in the video.
It'll be in the video,
Yeah,
too.
it will be, but I would still, that's one of those things.
I don't know if anybody's
put
gonna
in
wanna
the
sit there and
general
watch,
thing.
an hour of video just to,
If this discussion
Yeah,
continues,
just
I'll be back.
short paragraph,
yeah,
why,
summary,
background why.
yeah,
Been an hour and a half roughly.
okay.
How much would it
Well, we don't faster
So-
too. Yes.
That's
One-
another
1.5
question that I
hours.
would have is, we'd have to dismount the scope, probably take it apart a little bit, put it in a truck of some sort and drive it over there. I don't know what that would cost, but I'm sure it wouldn't be
Well, if anything, you'd have to have a low boy trailer.
something like that, yeah. And I imagine something that's, something that would be reasonably secure.
Yes, and steady. Doesn't break glass.
Yeah, but
I don't know if on my end, if I could try to swing a mission like that
It's
I don't know if it,
for a,
you have to have
tell them it's a training exercise.
yeah.
powerful.
Instead of imagine it's just
Well,
a
that's
funny
a good
looking
idea.
cannon, But
We've used the military for worse things.
well, it's your tax dollars at work. But anyway, so sounds to me like step one. I mean, I'm hearing support in this room. Is that correct? So
Everyone here votes, that gives you a majority of membership, so.
that's true. And again, if you have doubts about this, do express them, because the worst thing that can happen in any organization is everybody agrees.
Well-
Among the worst things that can happen,
Yeah, Gary's gone right now, and I'll just say right now, one of the things that came up years and years and years ago when we were starting Park Point and the asteroid thing, some people were upset because Gary was so passionate about it, and they thought that we were only helping Gary, and some of them left the club. So I'm just telling you, beware,
Well, one of the things I want to do is expand the uses of it, because
Yes.
the kind of stuff that I mean, I like doing the asteroid stuff, but I also there's some other stuff I would like to
Yeah.
use the scope for, and if we could
well,
get people
I'm
interested
just,
in that.
this group right here, a little nice warm little family group, I'm just telling you, that's what happened the last time, and we lost members for it. So I think we have to present it to them in such a way that it's not a done deal yet, that kind of thing.
We could potentially increase usage out at Fort Point, because that room will be open. And even if we get something like Gary's scope or some other stuff in there, that's enclosed. So we could maybe do stuff further into the winter months or
Right.
earlier in the spring. And yes, it would still be cold,
Well, and
but
it
you would
also-
at least not have the wind.
And you wouldn't have some of that light there.
Right, and you'd be blocking some of the light, and it would be easy for people to be in that same little room, not have to be outside, although you would still have to get out there, like, a couple weeks ago was not possible.
Yeah,
obviously.
and
Well, no, I mean,
It
there
may
was
still
a
not
time
be,
that
I don't know.
there were other scopes and, that
Yeah.
they worked around.
Yeah,
So-
I had, last time we had the open house out there, I had my 8-inch out there in the southeast corner running along with
Yes.
Tombach.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been done before.
Oh, and I'm sure that it has, but, I mean, it also takes up a fair amount of space, too.
Yeah.
And it has been cleaned up a lot out there, but there's still workbenches, and there used to be more stuff in that room, and it's more cleaned up now, but it could probably still be.
Well,
Get-
just the
getting
fact
those
that
stairs
the
out of
wouldn't
there
be
is
there,
a-
that
Yeah,
cleared
that
out a
too.
whole lot of room, so, yeah.
Well, yeah, and I don't see any erosion of the mission, if you will, of what goes on out there, and in some ways, like you said, I think it could enhance the uses of that. because-
And that goes somewhat to what you're saying too, because that puts some of the more scientific side out somewhere else. But it lets people, and especially if Gary were to say donate his scope and still have some of that same capability. even though it's not
Gary will
quite the same.
donate that scope.
Well, and
I've already committed myself to that.
which is
My wife
great.
said.
And so, there's always, there are always going to be, I think, more people who go, wow, look, there's, you know, at the, whatever, the Milky Way or the constellations, whatever it is, you know, or the planets, then the people that are really interested in the scientific side of it, I mean, there's always plenty of people that are interested in scientific, but if, you know, somebody has a sibling or a friend who, you know, is more into that, and they somehow find out about going out just looking at the stars and seeing neat stuff, oh, hey, we went out there and then we have another scientific person come in, or vice versa. You know, they can tell their friends, come out and see the stars, or whatever, the planets, or whatever's going on,
Right.
so it could increase membership.
Well,
That's
it
what-
might, because I've heard from parents and from teachers that the kids come out, you know, and they look through a telescope or whatever, and then the next you know, Monday or whatever, all the astronomy books are gone out of the library. They're all get checked out, and that's always a good thing to keep the brains going, which, you know, in the current, one of the things I hear from teachers in the current atmosphere around here is there's so much based on the test, and everything is based on that. But when you can see kids' minds going, that is a harder thing to do now. But astronomy does every single time.
Well, at least there's-
Analytical thought is a thing of the past.
Yeah, but I mean, they see a reason for it though too.
You said Farpoint was founded, or was it built in '96, right, you said?
It was actually, yeah, when we opened, it was in late '96.
Well, I'm just thinking in terms of the fundraising campaign and some PR to set this up, you know, what better way to celebrate 30 years than
We're right.
expanding our
Yes,
mission
okay.
with a remote site and new capabilities and all. So I think there's a way to frame it to set up.
Exactly, yes, yeah, we've been out there 30 years almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sure, we're also
sounds like-
able to expand our, building on what you're saying, expand our offerings at Farpoint. Get into, especially with Gary School, enhanced astrophotography, and teach kids how to do that.
Great setup for fundraising.
Yeah, it's not gonna be any weight difference, it's a lot smaller scope, it's a 22-inch scope, but it weighs as much as the other one does. The 27-inch does. That's the problem when you have a machinist operating.
On that side note, where we're coming up on 30 years, it might be time to contact WIBW and say, we're coming up on 30 years of being of service.
Well, about any of our public announcement contacts and that sort of thing are gonna have to be worked pretty heavily into this, because that's the only way you're gonna draw enough attention.
Well, and that might draw some attention and make the funding pitch.
And that could even
more
actually
visible.
be I mean, I'm just spitballing things out, but if we had a 30th celebration event of some kind, that could be a good way to kind of kick off some of our fundraising.
An open house.
Yeah.
Just before we get, I'm gonna transfer over a little bit to actual real science and viewing. There's a lunar eclipse coming up in March. That's gonna be from about 10 o'clock to about 3 o'clock in the morning. It's gonna last, it's got about an hour's worth of totality in it coming up in March. So I think we could do something even for the public at that point. And I know it's, midnight, and who's gonna come out at midnight, but you might be surprised. If the weather holds, which it always does. Anyway.
You just jinxed it.
I know. Anyway, that's a publicity area, I think, also.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Well, gosh.
Okay, well, I'll get some more stuff kind of put together the best I can and get it to you.
Okay.
And then you can disseminate.
Okay. Well,
And thanks, Lynn, for considering this.
Sure.
I
Yep,
appreciate
thank
that.
you.
Thank you, Lynn, very
yeah,
much.
I mean, I think this is an opportunity, and one that, could have some pretty significant benefits. I know it'd be a big uphill climb to get the funds that are needed and, put it all together, but the benefits could be pretty considerable,
There is a possibility, one grant possibility is not gonna happen for about a year and a half now, but there's the Planetary Society, which I've been a member of for a long time now, has a Shoemaker Neo grant, which we've gotten in the past a couple times.
Yeah.
We haven't done that lately because they want to distribute more out to different places, but I think we're back into the cycle maybe now on this next round. We could apply for a grant for, $10,000 or so.
And that actually kind of makes me think that at some point, particularly maybe if we do get a committee formed to work on this kind of stuff, one of the business items of that committee might be breaking this down into pieces and how much each piece would cost and who might fund it. So just something to think about. Alrighty, well, thank you all for, I don't want to cut off the discussion. Do we feel like we're getting close to?
I think we're gonna get cut off.
We're getting close to the witching hour here, so, any last minute thoughts? Again, I very much appreciate you coming out. I was hoping to get good turnout for this, so I'm pleased to see everyone here. Do you want to say anything about the thing in Lawrence?
Yeah, there's the Lawrence Club, which is pretty small. David Cole, who gave a presentation here a few months back, is going to be talking February 2nd, that's a Sunday night. Home-built, was it a spectral heliograph?
Mm-hmm.
And, there's been some interest in moving that direction among some of the members of this club. The meetings are 7 o'clock at the Baker Wetlands Discovery Center. If you know Lawrence, even if you don't, you get at 31st Street past Menards, and it's about a quarter mile south.
I'm actually planning on going to that, unless something
It
happens.
was scheduled for this Sunday night, but then Chiefs decided to play.
Okay, well, again, thanks for coming out. We'll hopefully keep this moving forward. So if you got any comments, follow-ups, suggestions, please let me know. I think we all have email access. You can email me at my account or through the Groups.io. If you got any thoughts on topics for a meeting, I would love to hear them. Otherwise, I'll think of something between now and next month. Other than that, I guess we are adjourned.